Okay, so we've looked at two objects interacting to see that they create paired forces of equal magnitude and opposite direction. So yes, all forces have an equal and opposite reactive force, though we might not always think about that. So in this moment, we can disregard and minimize Newton's third law, but we will be looking at what happens when there's one object and two forces exerted on that object to understand net force. So when you go to the simulation, you click the net force view. I want you to always have the sum of forces and values selected so that you can see sum of forces is the same thing as net forces. And we'll be understanding that right now, why it's called sum. So the different size of simulation human means different force. So if I add the greater guy, he's 150 newtons. If I add the medium guy, he is 100 newtons. If I add the smaller guy, they are, 50 newtons. So 150, 150. So what I want us to look at is what happens if we had, to understand net forces, what would happen if we had 100 newtons on one side and 100 newtons on the other side. We're going to have a net force of 0 because 100 minus 100 equals 0. If you have forces going in opposite directions, you're going to subtract. So 100 minus 100 equals 0. Now let's see if I had 50 newtons on this side. Again, you're going to subtract the bigger force, or you're going to subtract the smaller force from the bigger force. So 100 minus 50 equals a net force of 50. Now, what would happen if I have the forces in the same direction? I would have 50 newtons plus 100 to make a net force of 150 newtons. So if they're going in the same direction, if the force is going in the same direction, then you add those two forces together. If they're going in opposite directions, you subtract those forces to find, again, the net force.